So we're actually standing up and they came over the top of the hill and we just froze. And I was standing there with my gun, ready. And I was like, hey, I'm going to shoot. And he was like, just wait 1 more minute. I think he was waiting for the second bird to come so that we could get a double. And what ended up happening is I dropped that first bird, and a couple minutes later, Patrick was able to take another one, and we both walked out successful that day, which is really awesome. And, for me, it's not so much about the size of the bird or getting the picture for Instagram or anything like that. It's more or less the experience. And that was one of the more fun turkey hunting I've ever had. So I'm really glad that we did that.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Sig Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, Sig Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, Sig Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. Sig Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the Sig Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about Sig Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com. Christi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Christi Holmes. I'm a registered Maine guide in hunting and fishing. I live in southern Maine. I founded the group called Maine Women Hunters and just an avid outdoorsman, I guess.
Jill?
I'm Jill LaPlante. I am an avid outdoorsman, woman, I guess. And I have not really been a hunter for a very long time, but I really love it. And I also founded a group called New England Sportswomen, which the intent there is to promote and empower women to become more involved in the outdoors.
Why do women need a group like that? How does that benefit you?
So I believe that for me, based on my personal experience, I didn't have any sort of a mentor in the outdoor hunting, fishing world. So I was fortunate enough to meet someone named Hillary in college who was able to introduce me to turkey hunting and just got me hooked on it and was able to get me outside. And she's the one who really guided me, and that inspired me to then want to teach other people, particularly females, in the sense that it's a bit of an intimidating sport to get into, whether it's hunting or archery or fishing, because it's not easy to just go to a range and pick up a gun or buy a bow without having some sort of a mentor to show you the way.
Gotcha. How about you, Christi?
Yeah. There's something to be said about women teaching other women, and like Jill said, it's more empowering, I think. Our group is over 3,000 women now, and it's something about learning with other like-minded people, and the dynamic does change when you have men in the group. And I think it's just, you can ask questions like, do you ladies, do you use a shiwi? Do you hunt while you're on your periods? What's the best thing to put my baby in on the boat so I can go fishing? Questions that women would feel too shy or embarrassed to ask men in a male group. And I've noticed ladies will also share a little more personal experiences, like, oh, I missed a deer tonight and I feel really disappointed. And everyone is so supportive. And I think in a co-ed group, you wouldn't get that. But I mean, I've learned from men. Men are great. I mean, most women learn from men. And I think I speak on behalf of most women that we are very grateful for men teaching us, fathers, partners. But there's just something about a girls club, I guess, and sharing these typical male things, but with fellow females.
I agree fully with you, Christi. And I think part of it too is it's non-traditional. You know, it's not necessarily something that people are used to seeing. So if you go to a range or if you go to a bow shop, and I'm the only one in there that's a female, so everyone's kind of looking at you, expecting you to either not know what you're doing, or they have a very high expectation of, hey, you must know what you're doing because you're here. And if you're not comfortable with that, it can be really intimidating. And it kind of, especially if you don't have someone or the history of growing up like that, it's really hard to kind of overcome that fear of being looked at when you walk into a store to get the initial introduction.
What are some mistakes that guys make when they are teaching a woman something about hunting or fishing or trapping, something outdoors? What are we doing wrong?
I think at least when my boyfriend tries to teach me things, he can be a little more critical. And I'm like, can you just like give me some positives? You know, the sandwich method, you do like a positive and then some criticizing and then a positive.
What do you think, Joe?
I'm thinking about this question because it's a good question. So for me, it's not so much about being overly critical or anything like that, but it's more I'd like to just do it myself, you know. And a lot of the time I get the whole, oh well, let me just help you, or I'll go with you, I'll just do that. And it's like, hey, don't baby me. I just let me try it first. And if I really can't do it, I'll ask, because I'm very stubborn and I want to figure it out myself. So often, whether it's male or female, honestly, that's just how I am. But I think across the board, men do have a tendency to be chivalrous. And if I'm crossing a stream or something like that, it's like, hey, let me take that. Let me grab your bag. Let me help you. It's like, hey, I got it.
Yeah, I think part of that stream crossing stuff is definitely a double-edged sword, because as a guy, if I see somebody crossing a log over a stream, I want them to fall in. I'm going to think that's hilarious. But I also know that if it's a woman and she falls in and I laugh, that I'm going to be in trouble for that. So it's in my, best interest in self-preservation to like make sure that I don't put myself in a situation where I'm laughing at somebody that just fell in.
Valid.
What's it take to become a guide in Maine, Christi?
Well, to become a guide in Maine, you have to sit and take a test. It consists of, you can choose whether you want to do hunting, fishing, or recreation, or all three. But each test has a written portion, and that's usually like the easiest. It's laws, identification, and then there's the map and compass portion. And if you study, you should do okay on that. That's probably what most people fail though, because you're nervous and it's a little tricky. And then there's the verbal section. So you have two either master Maine guides or game wardens sitting with you in a room for an hour, just grilling you. And they will hand you a firearm and ask you to tell them about it. They will point to photos of ducks on the wall and ask you to ID the ducks. They'll show you plants. Even in like when I took the fishing one, they asked about plants. They ask about types of trees. And then they do a lot of situational questions. So they'll say, hey, you're taking me grouse hunting and I shoot a spruce grouse and what are you, or they'll say, I shoot number 8 on the wall. What are you going to say to me? And then you say, well, that's spruce grouse. You're not allowed to shoot those. So, and then they want to see if you're going to stick by your guns, and oh no, don't tell the warden I shot a spruce grouse. I'll leave you a bad review. You won't get a good tip. So they really test you. They ask you about knots, tying knots. They ask you about fishing line. They handed me a box of flies and said, name all the flies you can in here. They really expect you to have a breadth of knowledge and a depth of knowledge. And they want to know that you're going to keep your clients safe, so the game wardens don't have to come rescue you and your client.
That's impressive. I can tell you what it takes in Oregon is a CPR first aid card. You pay for a guide license and you pay for insurance, and ominous, you are a guide. Congratulations. So there's no mandate or expectation of skill. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame. And a lot of states have a similar issue with whitewater. There's at least a skill requirement. You have to have, so many trips and so many days with, class 4, class 5 whitewater before you can get a guide license in Idaho, for example. But I think that we need to seriously look at the Maine model and implement that in a lot of other states, because the quality of the guides is significantly higher in Maine than it is in other places because the standards are higher.
Yeah, I've heard of some people come to Maine and study the Maine laws and to get the Maine licensure just so they can go out west, and it proves that they're, it sets them apart when they guide out west.
What made you want to become a guide?
I think part of it was seeing if I was good enough to become a guide, if I could pass the test, and then just knowing that I would have that certifications for the rest of my life, and help other women and kids and stuff.
Now, both of you two are engineers, and you're both avid outdoorsmen, and also started women's hunting groups. Is that a coincidence?
That's why we're friends.
When I stumbled across Christi's profile, actually, the funny thing, my aunt was listening to, I think, the Morning Buzz or something, Christi, that you did, and she was like, "You have to get in touch with this woman, Christi. She was just on the buzz. She sounds like you. This is weird." So I actually, when I found your profile and messaged you, I was like, "Can we have a phone call, because this is interesting?" And I just ran by Christi what I was planning to do with New England Sportswomen, and we kind of came across the fact that we were similar in that way.
It's kind of interesting that fishing and hunting often end up being grouped together, and they're wildly different. They both occur outside, but beyond that, there's more differences than there are similarities between fishing and hunting. Within these groups that both of you have started, how have you tried to attack that? Do you try to do more hunting based things, more fishing based things? Like, what's easier? Is one a gateway for the other?
I have found for our group trips that fishing, you can just bring more people on it, and pretty much everyone can be successful. So those are really popular. Our group hunts are smaller, 4 people, or else you can't hide. But yeah, and in Maine, it's like the 4 seasons are, fall hunting everything, and then there's ice fishing, and then there's turkey hunting, and then open water fishing. So they kind of don't overlap a ton. So it's nice that in the summer, when there's nothing to hunt, everyone wants to go fishing.
Fishing has a much easier barrier to entry. You don't necessarily need to have a hunting license. You just have to, you can buy a fishing license online. You don't really need to know what you're doing to go on a fishing trip. Someone can just hand you a rod and say, "Hey, this is how this works. Let's figure this out today." And it's a good time.
Christi, what are some of the differences for you between actually participating in hunting versus guiding?
Well, when I go hunting, I usually go by myself, and it's kind of my own time to kind of unplug, unwind. Sometimes I bring my dog. And then guiding is just all about like the shared joy of seeing, women shoot their first duck, or it's just like so much more exciting. It's like a team effort. And it's just so nice to like live vicariously through other people, like experiencing their first.
Yeah, that is a really great moment. And I think I've talked about this before on the show, but I think all of us sort of wish that we could have that first experience again for what ended up being something that, changed who we are as people. It's a lot more than a hobby. It's a lot more than just something you do on a weekend. Like, it becomes part of your identity. And if you knew when you first did it that was going to happen, like, how much different would that have changed that first experience? And you can never have that back again. But guiding, you can sort of have it back again, and you can have it and share that with a lot of people. And that is something that I definitely appreciate and enjoy about guiding as well. What are the species that you guide for?
I do a lot, a few groups of ice fishing, because you can bring lots of people on that one. And then upland hunting with my dog, mostly.
And what's the deal with not being able to hunt on Sundays?
It's like an old law that is still around, but Maine is about 90% privately owned, and a lot of our land is like privately owned by timber companies, and they allow the public to hunt and recreate on their land, which is great. So that makes it feel like public land, but it is private land. So we have a law in Maine where if it's not posted, you can hunt and recreate on it. And every year the legislature thinks about allowing Sunday hunting, and the private landowners are like, no way. So until the private landowners support it, I don't think it will go away.
Massachusetts is also a anti-Sunday hunting state.
And why is that in Massachusetts?
Same reason. It's just an old law, and I think there's been a few different attempts to try and push for Sunday hunting, and it got some pushback from guides, in the sense that like having a day to take a break, I guess. Maybe Christi can speak to that more, but
those guides need to toughen up. Guides don't get breaks.
This is Massachusetts.
Yeah, well, they need to, harden it up a little bit. That's bogus.
That's why my favorite state to hunt is New Hampshire, to be honest. You don't need to have access. You can just go anywhere. You don't need permission to hunt there, which is really interesting, similar to Maine. Well,
what you'll notice if you come out and hunt in the West is that the public land, and this is an unpopular opinion, but the public land that's managed by the government is in pretty rough shape. It's in pretty rough shape. But if you can get access to private land, whether that's access that everybody gets or just permission that you've gotten for yourself, you're going to have a lot better experience and significantly better habitat. Even if the terrain and vegetation has the same potential, private landowners are able to go in there and actually work on improving the habitat. And they're working on agriculture, and they're working on timber, and working on thinning and things like that make it so that wildlife can utilize this stuff. In Oregon, for example, I think we're 60% public, but 90% of our wildlife spends all of their time on private land, and it's because it's better habitat for them. So you've got a good thing going on there, and you have to be careful with it, because those timber companies can get tired of you, and they can say no, and they'll walk around and post their borders, and that's the end of it. And we've seen some of that occur in Western Oregon and Western Washington, for example. The timber companies just had enough because people were abusing their property, and I don't blame them for it. So I would recommend trying to figure out who's who with those timber companies and become buddies with them, and then see what you can be doing to help them out so that you can keep using that ground. And then if other people are abusive and it turns, you might be the one that gets to keep hunting it.
Yeah, I think part of it is just, we're like old curmudgeon Mainers, and we're like, oh, we can't change anything. We can't allow Sunday hunting. That's changed. We're stuck in
Yeah.
our ways.
Both aspects of that are really bizarre. One, that you can hunt on private land without permission, and two, that you can't hunt on Sundays. And it would never fly out west, because I don't know. We've never had that tradition, but people work all week long and then they want to hunt on the weekends. They want to hunt both days of the weekend. It seems crazy that they wouldn't be able to. I have heard in some of the southern states that don't allow Sunday hunting that they did it to keep men at home at least one day a week. And I think that that's funny that they had to legislate that.
I just fish on Sundays, so I'm not that upset about it.
I think part of it too is the nature lover, like people who want to go out and hike. They want to have the opportunity to have a day where they're not going to be in the woods with hunters. And another interesting thing about New Hampshire, so there's actually a tax credit if you do not post your property. So it's an incentive for people to actually open up their land and allow people, or I guess not post their land, so that people can continue to hunt, hike, fish, or whatever on that property. And then the landowner is incentivized to do so.
There are some programs for that out west. Like Montana has block management, and a landowner can allow public access, and they can even mandate how that access occurs. So they can say non-motorized, just for these species, just these days of the week, written permission only. There's all kinds of controls that they can put over it, or they can just completely open it up. But there's a tax incentive for them to do that in the state of Montana. And they have huge patches of block management land that are really wonderful areas to hunt. Oregon has access and habitat, which, is a mimic of block management that doesn't work as well, but it does work in some places. And I'm sure other Western states have similar programs. And I think that that's terrific, right? That's private landowners and the public and the government all working together so that everybody can meet their own resource objectives. I'd like to see a lot more of that. So, Christi, what's your hunting season going to look like this year?
Well, I filled one of my turkey tags last week. I'm going to go out with my bow tomorrow, try to get one with my bow. And then the striped bass are almost here in Maine. So then I'll do some saltwater fishing, and then fall, I'll go ruffed grouse hunting, woodcock hunting with my dog. I have a Brittany, and whitetail hunting, maybe some bear hunting. We'll see. I put in for my moose tag, so they'll draw those in a couple weeks.
Maine got my money for moose too, so we'll see.
Well, non-residents, you can buy as many chances as you want. So if non-resident listening has a budget, you might be able to kind of buy your way into a moose tag. It'd probably be cheaper than Alaska.
Yep, it might be. I'm not historically lucky on those things, so I think I only put in once. But
I didn't realize that. Maybe I'll have to start buying some entries.
Yeah.
Residents can't buy entries. I think I have like 12 bonus points. So maybe in the next few years, I'm thinking I'll be drawn.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a turkey hunting story.
Oh, well, last year was probably my most exciting year for turkeys. My boyfriend, he's less of a turkey hunter than me. He started turkey hunting when we met. So last year I was like, okay, you can shoot first. So we went to this place where I had gotten permission, and the sun's coming up and we hear this hen just like yakking. And I'm like, I don't know, it kind of sounds like another hunter. And sure enough, the sun comes up and we see decoys 100 yards away, like pretty close. And I'm like, oh man, like great. And so we hear a tom gobbling, and he's kind of down the field from both of us. and he starts making his way over, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to call because this guy's calling his brains out. And so finally the Tom crested the hill, and I'm like, okay, well, now I have to call to try and get him to come to us. And we had a Tom decoy out with a real fan. And I think that's what brought him. That's why he chose us, I think. So he came in and my boyfriend shot him. And then I was like, oh man, this guy's going to be so pissed that like he did almost all the calling. And then the Tom chose us, but he was the nicest guy. He was so nice. So, and then a couple days later at the same place, I hunted all day because some people will call it patience. I call it stubbornness. So I was like, I know the turkeys, this is their spot where they like to hang out. Because I didn't have permission to hunt where they roost, even though it wasn't posted. I just didn't want to hunt over there because I hadn't asked permission. So, and I was sitting there all day, and it was like 5:30 p.m. and they started kind of working their way back to the other property where they were going to roost. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna put a stalk on them. And they were, the flock was it was a Christmas tree farm. So the trees were about 3 to 4 feet tall, which is actually perfect for stalking a turkey, because I was pretty well hidden crawling, but I could see his fan, and he was like doing a dance with the hen trying to like mate her. So at one point, all the other hens spotted me and took off running, but him and the hen just kept circling each other, doing this trance. So he was clearly distracted. So I range finded him and took him at about 50 yards when he finally separated enough from the hen. And that turkey I had scored, he was had 1.5 inch spurs, which is pretty big for here in Maine. So he scored 70.4 for a typical turkey, which is pretty big.
Wow, nice job. What's your go-to turkey recipe?
I make a mean pot pie, and then I'll do turkey nuggets with the legs. I like to crock pot them, and I'll make a barbecue pulled pork sandwich with those, or I do buffalo chicken dip and just put the turkey leg in it because it just tastes like buffalo anyway. So.
Christi, you're gonna have to give me some pointers on cooking wild turkey.
Oh, it's good. You got to like soak it in water for a day or two.
Yeah, I haven't figured it out yet.
Well, Jill, I want to hear about your and Patrick's hunt this year.
Oh boy. So for the past couple of years now, we've been going out as a tradition in New Hampshire. Opening weekend, we'll go and turkey hunt. So this year, him and I went. There were supposed to be 4 of us actually, and 2 of the guys bailed last minute. It ended up just being Patrick and myself, which is fine. We totally have fun. So we went out, and I was a little late, and probably like by 5 minutes. When I say late, that's really late to me. So we ended up going to the spot where I had never been before, and it was a fenced-in farm field area. So right away we heard turkeys making all kinds of noise in the trees. They were still roosted, and we were walking, and it was still somewhat dark. I mean, it was legal shoot, but it was just barely. So we're walking, and all of a sudden, these 3 young toms just flew out of a tree and probably 50 yards in front of us. So Patrick was like, "Don't move." And both of us just hit the deck. And I was like all contorted in this weird angle, laying on the ground with my shotgun, and my elbow must have fallen asleep I had to have been 30 minutes. And, Patrick's just sitting there calling. I don't know how he managed to call without being detected, but finally these birds moved over. A hen came walking through, and the birds moved over, and we were able to just kind of army crawl away and into the tree line. And at that point, he was like, "Hey, those are young birds. What do you think we should do here?" And I was like, I don't care. I think we should go shoot them." So he's like, "Okay." So we ended up
That's the
finding
spirit.
I
I
was
like it.
like, I'm hungry, man. So we ended up walking along the tree line, just really slow, calling. And at that point, the hen must have decided that they weren't her man. She wanted to find a big old tom. So she left them and went across the field, and they didn't follow her. So they then became interested in the noises that we were making with the slate call. So we're actually standing up, and they came over the top of the hill, and we just froze. And I was standing there with my gun, ready. And I was like, "Hey, I'm going to shoot." And he was like, just wait one more minute. I think he was waiting for the second bird to come so that we could get a double. And what ended up happening is I dropped that first bird, and a couple minutes later, Patrick was able to take another one, and we both walked out successful that day, which is really awesome. And, for me, it's not so much about the size of the bird or getting the picture for Instagram or anything like that. It's more or less the experience. And that was one of the more fun turkey hunting I've ever had. So I'm really glad that we did that.
Nice.
Was that in New Hampshire?
Yep.
And can you get two birds there? Two bearded?
Yeah. So, obviously we each have our own tags. So per person, you're allowed to just get either two bearded birds in either season or one per season. So like hunt fall or spring. And you can only hunt until noon in the spring in New Hampshire, which is wild. I didn't realize that Maine, you can hunt all day until I was on my, the New England Sportswomen page. And I saw that someone was out all day, and I was like, oh, that's good to know. Maybe I'll start hunting Maine for turkeys.
It used to be just until noon in Maine, and then they opened it up all day. And we're allowed two bearded in the spring. And then most of Maine, they opened up to 5 in the fall, any sex, because our population is doing so well.
Yeah, the populations have been crazy in all of New England. And I think it's contributed a lot to the fact that they're just in people's yards, literally. Like you can't get to them. We could drive around all afternoon and see 100 turkeys, and you just can't get them because they're eating at people's bird feeders.
I think you can get 12 turkey tags in Montana. You can get 2 or 3 in Oregon, a couple in Idaho. I've never hunted turkeys in Oregon for longer than an hour. And it may be less than that. It is so easy. And I hear people struggle on the East Coast and in the South. And I should just do it. I should go back there and turkey hunt with you guys sometime just to see what the problem is, because it is not a problem out here.
The biggest issue is just finding a place where they are that's not so close to someone's house that you're going to, get arrested, especially with a shotgun. It's even if it is legal range, it's still a little bit sketchy if you can see someone's house.
They make silencers for shotguns too.
We don't have a lot of agriculture here. It's just heavily wooded. So they're hard to see. That makes deer hunting really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, you're welcome to come.
I hunted deer in Maine last year, and it was definitely an interesting experience. I think the deer have the advantage there for sure.
Yeah. James, you should tell Christi a little bit about how that experience went for you.
Well, we went up there to hunt deer in the snow with howl blood and track and do all that stuff, and there wasn't any snow. So that made everything a little bit more challenging than it already was. And it's not a terrain that I'm used to. It feels like the entire place is a beaver swamp. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. We saw one deer. It was running at the time, and had some good food, had some good fun. And it was cool to see that country. It was cool to go into town there and see the scale, and it blows my mind that people pack deer out whole. I think that's absolutely bonkers. But if you, I don't know, don't have television or something like that. I don't know why you do that to yourselves for entertainment, but drag them, I guess, if you're into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the challenge that we enjoy.
Yeah. Deer hunting in Maine is definitely humbling.
Well, Jill, if you
I watch the YouTube videos of people out west and I'm just like, oh my gosh, look at all the deer they have.
Yeah, especially archery. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, Jill, if you kill an elk in Idaho this year, I fully expect you to drag it out whole to the trailhead.
I'll start working out now.
Yeah, I think if you gain about 250 pounds of muscle and get lucky, you might have a chance.
I dragged
shoot a small one.
Yeah, I dragged a big-bodied buck, probably 2.5 miles by myself. I think it was 162 pounds dressed, if I remember correctly. And that was mentally challenging as much as it was physically. I wanted to give up every 4 feet. I was taking my shotgun and moving it 4 feet in front of me, and then I would back drag by the antlers, grab my gun, move it forward, back drag. So really, however mileage I did, or whatever mileage I did, I basically doubled it because I was going forward and back the whole time.
And what state was that in?
That was New Hampshire. And
are you required to bring deer out whole there, or can you quarter them?
I don't know. I've honestly, I've never looked into not dragging a deer. I've never even heard of someone quartering a deer.
Okay.
Me neither. Well, a moose. Yes.
Maybe we should do some Googling because we could save ourselves some struggles if we're way up in the mountains somewhere.
Might be worth a Google.
It's a good problem to have, dragging out a big deer.
Honestly, even if I had to quarter it, that was my first deer that I'd ever shot, and I wouldn't have known how anyway. I would have been trying to Google or YouTube things.
Yeah. Well, there's more than one way to do it. Christi, where can people find out more about you and your group?
We're on Facebook called Maine Women Hunters, and we're also on Instagram, the same name. And then I'm on Instagram, Christi Holmes.
What about you, Jill?
I'm on Instagram, New England Sportswoman, and we also have a Facebook page. And then Jill LaPlante is my personal Instagram account.
Cool. Well, I thank both of you very much for your time. And I also want to thank you for what you're doing. You're getting people into the game that otherwise might not be able to. And I think that's awesome. We should all be trying to do that because there's a lot to be gained from hunting and fishing and trapping and just doing all this stuff outside that makes you a better person. And the world can definitely use more better people right now. And I think that the two of you are making it happen. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, good luck this season and keep killing it.
Thank you. You too.
Will do.
I live in an old cabin with bad to non-existent insulation and wood heat. That cabin can see snow every month of the year and needs a good amount of firewood stacked in the woodshed to carry through the colder months. This spring, as my woodpile turned to smoke and ash, I noticed something metal pushing out of the decades of sawdust and bark. I kicked at it and unearthed a Stanley thermos. The cup was missing, and it showed more worn stainless steel than green. There were dents in the metal, and the handle looked like a puppy had chewed on it, but it still hadn't leaked the old coffee I could feel slosh inside. It took me back to memories of cutting firewood with my dad, waking up early for an elk hunt, or going out to the canyons to gather cattle. A Stanley thermos has the durability to survive whatever hard work you throw at it. You may find it carries memories as well as coffee. Learn more about their new and classic line of products at stanley1913.com or at your local sporting goods store. And catch you next week. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at Six Ranch Podcast or me at Six Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the Six Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.